Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week by week basis. And today's topic of discussion is education. And I want to continue the conversation from what we had last week on situational awareness. And so this is really where things escalate one notch higher, where you're now in an interaction that can either diffuse or escalate, depending on how you respond. And so just to give some additional context, for those of you who haven't watched my initial video, I just wanted to tell you that since I was a very young age, I've had a lot of training by way of situational awareness. I've had to deal with a lot of violence against women from middle school all the way up until university. So lots of training involved by way of self-defense. My father himself did martial arts. He taught me different things that I needed to know just to neutralize a threat. I never formally did martial arts on my own, but I don't think that you need to necessarily to be able to keep yourself safe if you follow certain guardrails and if you follow certain guidelines. And so I want to give some of the guardrails and the guidelines that I follow myself to keep myself safe in different situations that I have found myself in. I think, of course, prevention is better than cure, but some things you can't prevent. So you need to do your best to really be eyes wide open and figure out a way to get out of that situation safely. And so now I want to talk about how we engage with someone who is still deciding as to whether or not we're a target. And so a lot of this really does happen in more like party culture, and partying is a part of just life. It's part of growing up, right? So like in high school there's partying, in university there's lots of partying, and even like I was a frosh boss when I was in university, and so much of our training had to do around dealing with people who were highly intoxicated and how you keep intoxicated people safe from like predatory people, because it's just like a jungle, it's like a zoo out there, right? When you think about just all of the different levels of danger that get introduced when you start to mix alcohol with predatory behavior, with blurred lines around consent. I mean, it can be really a very tricky and traumatic situation to navigate. And so I'm going to give you a few tips here and now. So one of the first things that I've learned, and this is really about managing impressions, really is when you say no, you say no once, right? And no should never sound like a plea. And so when you talk about situational awareness, when you're engaging with someone who's still deciding as to whether or not they can dominate you and make you do what they want you to do with or without your consent, it really is based on how you stand your ground. And growing up in the country, it was very black and white. Like if I said no, if I wasn't ready to like put my fists behind it, then my no meant absolutely nothing. Like now, like when I moved to the city, it's just a little bit more psychological warfare. Like you can say no and someone pretends like they agree with your no, but they're going to find different ways to get what they want out of you. They just aren't necessarily going to use brute force. And so those are one of the major cultural differences that I found growing up in the country and in the city, is that like in the country, like if someone doesn't agree with your no, like you're going to get the effect of that immediately. Like they're going to immediately challenge against your no. Whereas I find like in the city is much more around psychological warfare, where they'll pretend like they hear your no, but then they'll circle back around and they'll try to catch you by surprise. And so I think that's what's really, really important is first someone understand when they interact with you that it's going to be a fight, right? Like if you say no and they don't care about your no, that it's not going to be easy for them to overpower you or to get what they want. I think that's super important. And the best way to do that is you never make your no a plea. And I think that this is just a difficult skill to manage, because sometimes it is a plea, right? Sometimes like you see that you're really in imminent danger and you really feel yourself wanting to cower under the threat and the weight of it, but you really do need to like hold as much power as you can behind your no, right? Hold their gaze, say it once, be super clear, and let them know like this isn't a negotiable no. And so I learned how to like maintain that stance, like hold my no, especially like if I'm in a party situation, if they're like thinking that because I've got a little bit of a buzz, that means I'm a little bit more susceptible. And I've never given myself the luxury of being so buzzed that I couldn't know my own mind, right? I think even if you are with trust friends, I think there's just so much risk involved with not knowing with being so drunk to the extent that you don't know your own mind. And it happens sometimes by accident. It's not always something that happens intentionally. I mean, I've had incidents where I thought I was drinking a cooler. I wasn't drinking a cooler. It was just really well flavored vodka. And so I don't touch vodka a whole heck of a lot anymore. But at that point, like I was at least with people that I really trusted, so I was safe. But like in all cases, like you never really want to put yourself in a position where you're really counting on external factors for your safety. You want to at least have some of your faculties sort of at your disposal to deal with threats and deal with threatening situations. And so for me, like I have made it a rule that if I have ever in a situation where someone makes an advancement, asks a question, and it's like one of those loaded questions, like, it means more than the question itself. Anything where like I'm going to say no, I'm not going to justify my no. I'm not going to give a story. I'm not going to give a narrative behind it. I'm just going to say no, hold their gaze for maybe 5 seconds just to show that I'm serious. And I'm going to go about my day. I'm going to exit that discussion, that conversation. There's nothing more to be said beyond that no. And I think that it's really important to do that, especially when you see someone is sizing you up because they want to see whether or not they can dominate you. Why would you want to stay in a discussion with someone who's looking to dominate you, right? I think that I see so many people, like they say no, then they try to like brush it off and like keep the conversation going. And I think that's the worst thing that you can do. Well, you want to leave a strong position, right? And so for me, like if I know that I'm being sized up, like I know this thing could escalate into something that I don't want, then I'm going to say no. I'm going to be direct. I'm going to hold their gaze. I'm going to get out of there as quickly as possible, right? I'm not going to like scurry out of there, but I'm going to make my exit if ever it is the case that I see that I'm in a threatening situation or in a situation that could escalate, especially as a female. And I don't have this attitude like, well, I get it that that we should all be able to do the things that we want to do without fear of things happening to us. But that's just not the case sometimes. Sometimes the only way to mitigate bad things happening to you is to keep yourself safe and keep yourself out of that situation. So how you say no is super important. Don't plead your case, like say no, be direct, get yourself out of there. Now, if you try to say no and then when you try to leave, they try to block your exit, at that point, like don't be a hero. Try to get as much eyes and attention in that situation as possible. Like for me, like typically like my no is strong enough that if I say no and then make my exit, that's enough. Like they're going to let me go. But I've had like one-off cases where I've said my no, I've gone to make my exit, and then they try to like block my exit. And at that point, everyone and anyone is going to know that there's a situation going on because I'm going to get really loud, right? I'm going to like reiterate my no and say, get out of my way, right? And at that point, as long as there's attention on it, I think a lot of people who are looking to assert themselves over you in a way that's not conducive to your well-being want discretion. They want privacy. So if you get louder about the situation and about the altercation, then that's going to make them uncomfortable and that's going to make them back down, right? Not a lot of people want to subjugate someone in a way that's like obviously not okay with an entire audience there to watch and to like court what took place, right? They want it to happen in secret. They want to create a he said, she said scenario. So put as much light to it as possible. Another thing that I like to do when it comes to situational awareness, I don't answer questions, right? And I think so many of us want to be polite. And I realize that there's so many things about safety that make it so that you cannot be polite. And it's okay to not be polite. Like you don't need to apologize for being put in a situation where you have to be direct, you have to be dry sometimes. Like, and I'm never looking to instigate or to create more drama, but like if someone's asking intrusive questions, there's never a good reason for those questions, right? Like if someone's trying to get a rise out of me, that's not something that's going to benefit me at the end of the day. So I'm like very comfortable not being polite if it means that I'm going to get out of that situation safely, right? And I think sometimes like people are hoping that you fawn and that you like try to play nice, and they're just going to use that against you, right? So if you being loud and being rude is going to get them off your back, then I'm all about doing that. Like, and I was raised to be polite and to sit pretty. I was raised to do all of those things. But then when I realized like a lot of my friends were victimized because of those same things, I realized like I would much rather be seen as a shrew, right? For lack of a better term, than someone that could easily be overpowered, be intimidated, be, fill in the blank, right? And so I think that that's also very important. And also like creating distance. And I'm like big on creating distance. Like again, if I'm cornered, then I'm going to defend myself, obviously. But my preference is just distance as much as possible. And like for the person to know that like my objective is to put as much light on it and then create distance until they're held accountable, essentially. Because I don't think any bad situation lasts forever, but things can escalate if we aren't sort of being mindful of our own safety. Things can become more than what we ever intended them to be if we're not mindful of our safety. So these are the different ways that I maintain my safety in those types of situations. And where I grew up, you only had one of two choices. You were either seen as someone that was very accessible to all men, or you were seen as a shrew. And I'm using the polite word for it, but you were seen as a B or an H. Like you couldn't be anything in between. Like it was just very black and white. And I realized like if I wanted to get out of high school unscathed, and that turned into if I want to get out of university unscathed, and even like in my MBA, if I wanted to get out of my MBA unscathed, like I had to be seen as a shrew. Like I had to be seen as someone who like took no shit, because if I took even a little bit of it, I mean, I was a target for a lot of violence that I didn't want, that I don't think any woman wants. I think sometimes the best way of getting away from that is just like using language that makes them recognize that like you're just not going to be an easy target. And I think some people, and it's so funny because even when I was in France, like I would get catcalled, and I think some people think that there's something complimentary about a catcall, and there's nothing complimentary about it. It makes everyone feel, it makes me feel incredibly unsafe. And I remember I was sitting with someone who looked at me, he was like, well, you know, no one ever catcalls me. And it's like, there's nothing polite or I think noteworthy about being catcalled. It means that I'm attracting attention that could become violent. Like if you don't attract that kind of attention, like that's a good thing for you and for anyone around you. It's not safe. It's not something that I would ever wish on anyone, to attract attention that could lead to violence. And I don't know why there's like this jealousy factor on catcalling around women who get catcalled and women who don't, because I feel like it's just ignoring the fact that catcalling is a form of aggression that just escalates, right? And there's so many different kinds of aggression that we don't recognize as aggression that will only escalate based on how we react and how we respond. And I think that if you can get away with not saying anything, with ignoring, with pretending it didn't happen, fine. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to be face to face with someone who's still deciding if whether or not they can victimize you. And in those cases, you really do have to hold your ground. You have to stay strong. You have to just not shrink, even though you feel fearful at that point in time. You have to know that like your voice really does carry weight, even in front of someone who wants to take your voice away for whatever reason. And so I've learned that, and I stand by that. And I'm someone who has dealt with varying degrees of violence from men who wanted my attention. And the only reason why I feel like I'm in the position where I am now, where I haven't had nearly the amount of trauma that I could have based on the attention that I've attracted, is because I stand by these rules. I really do. And I'm very good at standing my ground, at creating as much visibility as possible in this situation in a way that keeps me safe. Because I think a lot of the times, like when you're dealing with someone who's more about the psychological warfare, who's not going to immediately tell you that they disagree with your no, and they're not going to listen to your no, it's like they're going to try first to discredit you. Because again, like people want discretion if they're looking to harm you, right? They do something that they don't want an audience. And so what you might want to do is like hysterically like call every single one of your friends and be like, hey, like I'm in a really bad situation, like this person is doing this to me. But recognize that after a point, like if those people don't see proof with their own eyes, if it seems far-fetched, then you start to play into the narrative that I'm sure that that person is creating around you being unhinged, or you being like not in the right headspace. And so sometimes like you can't call up a friend and call for help because they're expecting that phone call, because someone's already given them a narrative by which to from which to perceive that call. So sometimes you have to just navigate the situation on your own, or navigate your situation with people who understand how these kinds of violence plays out. Right. And you don't ever want to be in a position where you think you can count on someone who cannot be counted on. And as a result of that, you're further victimized. And now you're victimized not just by the violence that you're experiencing, but by the silence that surrounds you. And those are the worst kinds of betrayal to bounce back from. And so these are the different things that I have done that have helped me maintain my personal safety. And not just my sense of safety, my actual safety. Distance, being super firm, being able to hold eye contact with someone who you see is considering violence against you, is just trying to figure out like how best they do it. And it's hard to conceptualize like a human being like looking at you as prey, or looking at you as like they're a target, but like we all know that this exists. And with the statistics, is something that the majority of us will deal with at some point, or at many points in our life, not even just once, like multiple times within our lifetimes we'll deal with it. And so this is how I deal with it. And again, like in the countryside, like if you say no, you need to be ready to stand by your no. And so I am the kind of person like where I am saying no, I am always like mentally, physically positioning myself to stand by my no, right? Like I'm positioning myself for that. What is new, what has like a new element that kind of added to the equation was the psychological warfare part, where like I say no, they say fine, I understand, but they actually don't. And they're going to find a different way to try to, I guess, take what it is that they want. And even with that, like I'm happy to stand my ground in those situations as well. It's just important for me, for my own sense of self-worth, that my no's mean no, and that I will do what I can in what's in my power to defend my no, absolutely to the ground, that I'm never going to allow myself to say yes to something that intrinsically I completely disagree with. Whether that's my safety, whether that's a belief, whether that's a direction that I should be taking, no means no. And so this is the way that I stand by my no, that I protect my no, that I protect myself in front of someone who doesn't want to hear no. And hopefully this is helpful to whoever is listening to this video right now. I think this is an important conversation to have, because we all just assume we have these reflexes, and I don't think we all have these reflexes. I think that I'm lucky that I have even some of these reflexes. And it doesn't mean I do everything perfectly. Like I ran for years away from a stalker that I had who had a lot of influence, had a lot of power. And I felt like if I tried to cry wolf too much, like people would just discredit me and it would give him an opportunity. It would just give him like more access to me. So I was like, well, no, like at the end of the day, like I need to let time play out for people to really see what's going on. Like I can't be the one to cry and call for help because like he's using that against me. Like he's like a master at this psychological warfare. But I can create distance. I can start from scratch. And with time, people did see what was going on. People were able to observe it. And also with that time, with the amount of distance that I put between me and him, I was able to really build my life again. I found my partner and, you know, everything ended up turning out okay. But anyway, I think it's important to have these conversations on situational awareness. I think there's so much that I can contribute to the conversation around protecting yourself from violence, from someone who's targeting you, because it's something that I have lived through for so long, but it's not something I talk about quite enough. And so I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. I just watched the movie Safe Haven this weekend and it just hit so many chords within me. And with what's happening in the world around the violence that has taken place, like even with Athena's case, I'm just like, I need to be more vocal around how to defend ourselves against violence. But we're not like necessarily Muay Thai champions, right? And I don't think we need to be champions in some sort of martial art to be able to defend ourselves, but we need to have the conversations at the very least so that we're thinking about the reflexes that we need to cultivate to protect ourselves at the end of the day. In any case, that was what I wanted to come in here and talk about. It's some food for thought for you. Now, we are more than just a social media platform. We do try to offer programs that enable you to cultivate leadership, proficiency, to create meaning and fulfillment in your life. So we have these programs that we're building for adults. We already have programs for children. We actually offer parent-child workshops fostering leadership competencies in children. And so our leadership programs for children are focused on 4 key concepts: cultivating autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept. And each child, something for someone, something for everyone in your family, really, something for you, something for your kids, and it's all age appropriate. So check it out. Check out our website, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our website, check out the programs that we offer. And thank you again for tuning in. And I look forward to chatting with all of you very soon. We'll talk to you later.